everyone, and welcome to our Friday members only live stream here at the Northeast Georgia History Center. I am Marie Walker, and I am the director of the Ada Mae Ivester Education Center here, and it is my absolute joy to be giving this presentation today about Victorian wedding traditions, which, well, a lot of our traditions that we still follow with weddings today in the West, in the Western culture, well, they originate with Queen Victoria, or at least she made them popular. So at first, we're going to just talk about the wedding of Queen Victoria, since that is one of the biggest, most popular weddings of all time, because Queen Victoria, she's the monarch who lends her name to an age and established traditions that, well, we still follow to this day in lots of aspects of our life, including weddings. So she was married on February 10th, 1840, so this month, a couple hundred years ago, to Prince Albert of Saxon-Coburg-Gotha. And just like, well, her and other aspects of her life, her wedding was trend-setting, and it really, truly created the modern idea that we have of weddings today. So we're going to look at Queen Victoria's wedding as a whole, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece for a closer look. So Queen Victoria wore a white dress of heavy silk satin trimmed with Honton lace. She had a white lace veil and wore a diamond necklace and earrings, as well as a sapphire brooch, which was given to her by Prince Albert, and she carried a wreath of orange blossoms, a symbol of fertility. She wanted to include a lot of lace in her gown to boost the British lace industry. She chose a wedding gown design that incorporated it heavily. And this is also the reason why she chose to wear white, as it was thought to represent or present the lace best. The silk for her gown was spun at Spitalfields in London. And of course, I said she chose the Honton lace from Devon. Her gown was designed by William Dyce, head of the Government School of Design, which is now the Royal College of Art. And the dress itself was made by a woman called Marie Bartlett, along with, well, over 100 lace makers. And they worked on this exquisite design for over 6 months. It seemed that Victoria ordered the destruction of the pattern for the dress very soon after its completion, so that no one else could copy it. In her diary, Victoria wrote, "I wore a white satin dress with a deep flounce of lace and imitation of an old design." The white dress features a full skirt taken in at the waist with a number of pleats. There was also a large band of lace cut into the front, the short sleeves gathered into double puffs, and sat on the shoulder with plenty of lace detailing. Meanwhile, the bodice has a low neckline, which is shown off her sapphire brooch, which was a wedding gift from Albert. The young queen decreed that no one else should wear white to her wedding, which, well, kind of established another tradition. And the veil, which matched the ruffles on her dress, was 4 yards long and nearly a yard wide. This veil was so special that she actually wore it subsequently following her wedding, and only allowed one of her 5 daughters to wear it to their wedding. She carried a small bouquet of snowdrops and orange blossoms, snowdrops because they were Prince Albert's favorite flower. On her feet, she wore slippers which matched the white color of her dress. Victoria wanted to be seen as a doting bride before a queen. As such, she refused to wear anything that was explicitly royal on her wedding day. She forewent a crown or a tiara and chose to wear a wreath of orange blossoms instead, which is something that perhaps a country bride would wear and really also endeared her to her subjects. Nowadays, we associate the color white, or the white color of wedding dresses, with purity. However, white was actually a color which reflected wealth. Before Queen Victoria, white wedding dresses were reserved solely for the very wealthy, because white was a very difficult color to keep clean. and thus the gown would not be worn a lot after the big day. Queen Victoria was not the first bride to wear white, but she is the one who made the white dress popular, and a tradition that brides follow to this day. Now, what did Albert wear? Well, he was in the British Field Marshal's uniform and was escorted by a squadron of lifeguards. He entered the chapel to the strains of Handel's See the Conquering Hero Comes, followed by Victoria, who was given away by her uncle, the Duke of Sussex, which her father, since her father had died when she was very young. Queen Victoria had 12 young bridesmaids who carried her train that was 18 feet long and was embellished with orange blossoms. Long trains were a symbol of wealth and power for the simple fact that fabric was very expensive. Victoria's train bearers or bridesmaids wore white dresses that she had designed and turquoise brooches in the shape of an eagle. The brooches were a gift from the queen to each lady for the special day. Their wedding cake weighed 300 pounds and was 3 yards or 9 feet wide in circumference. And, well, it was designed by the confectioner Mr. Mondwit, and the cake was decorated with the figures of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, but they were dressed in ancient Greek costume. Orange blossom again, and sprigs of myrtle entwined together covered many of the layers, and multiple cakes were baked so that all the guests could enjoy a piece. So white wedding dresses have become a tradition in Western culture, and a wedding dress for the first marriage in Europe and European-dominated countries is now usually white. In Eastern cultures, though, red is the color that brides wear dating back to ancient times, and many more traditional Eastern brides still wear red to this day, except for the traditional Japanese Shinto bride who has always worn white. It is also only in recent history that white has become the default color for Western brides. An ancient Athenian bride wore a long violet or light reddish robe clinched at the waist by a girdle that the groom was meant to loosen later, symbolizing the loss of her virginity. The marriage was made official by a feast and followed by a torchlit procession that escorted the couple to the bridal chamber. In the medieval West, it seems that blue was a popular color for wedding dresses because it was the color that represented fertility and fidelity, and also was associated with the Virgin Mary. But Queen Victoria was not the first royal bride to wear a white wedding dress. The earliest recorded instance of a white wedding dress in Western culture is that of the English Princess Philippa on her wedding day to the Scandinavian King Eric in 1406. And she was dressed in a white tunic that was lined with ermine and squirrel fur. In 1558, Mary, Queen of Scots, wore white during her wedding to the soon-to-be King of France, despite the fact that the color white is the color for mourning for French queens at the time. It's kind of like showing up to your wedding today in a black dress. But for the next few centuries, white remains a rather popular color, but is by no means the obligatory or default color for brides to wear. Princess Charlotte of England wore an empire waist dress of metallic silver lame when she married Prince Leopold of Saxon-Coburg-Saalfeld in 1816. Princess Charlotte was extremely popular and would have been Queen of England if she had not died in childbirth the year after her wedding. Now, we're up to the middle of the 19th century. And no woman, not even royalty, expected to wear her wedding dress only once and then never again. That was an idea that would have been absurd even for the very rich before this second industrial revolution in the mid to late 1800s. Even Queen Victoria repurposed her wedding dress and veil for subsequent uses. If a non-royal woman did have a new dress made especially for her wedding, it was likely to become her new Sunday best dress, either as it is or in an altered or dyed state, until she wore it out or the fashion changed beyond the powers of alteration. More often than not, a woman got married in her best dress that she already owned and did not have a new dress made specifically for her wedding. But with the rise of photography and the wedding portrait in particular, well, that also went a very long way in popularizing the white wedding dress trend of Queen Victoria. So more than simply being a choice or popular, being the choice of the very popular Queen Victoria, white dresses looked really good and stood out in this new black and white or sepia-toned photography. They looked very distinct and provided a good background against which to showcase the beauty of the bride. In 1849, the women's magazines were already proclaiming that not only was white the best color for a wedding dress, but that it had in fact always been the best and most appropriate choice. It's a little bit of revisionist history. Cody's Lady Books announced that the custom has decided from the earliest ages that white is the most befitting hue for brides, whatever may be the material. It is an emblem of purity, of innocence of girlhood, and the unsullied heart she now yields to the chosen one. Well, Victorian ideas and these ideals of weddings, romantic love, and purity were kind of projected backwards to rewrite the dress as a symbol of innocence and virginity rather than, well, what it actually was, which is wealth and showing off British industry. Now, the tradition of wearing a wedding veil also dates back to ancient Rome, where a bride would wear a veil over her face to disguise herself from any evil spirits looking to ruin her wedding day. In ancient Rome, where marriages were celebrated with parties and banquets, it was a very important social event, if not a sacrament, and brides would wear long veils of a deep yellow color over a very complicated 6-part braided hairstyle. The yellow veil was described as being the color of flame, and thus the bride themselves were like torches, bringing light and warmth into their new husband's home. But this tradition had gone out of favor in the post-medieval world, and it had not gained in popularity again until Queen Victoria wore that lace veil on her wedding day. So we really have Queen Victoria again to thank for being the role model for modern bridal fashion, as bridal veils became incredibly popular after she was photographed in one. So here comes the bride. More wedding traditions were to come in 1858 when Queen Victoria's oldest daughter, Princess Victoria, named after her mother of course, married the Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia, and their family called them Vicky and Fitz. Now, Princess Victoria established the tradition of playing Wagner's bridal chorus during her wedding processional in 1858. Today, it is known as Here Comes the Bride, but its official name is Bridal Chorus. And it is part of an 1850 opera called Lohengrin, written by, well, Richard Wagner. The other famous wedding song used for the recessional, the Wedding March, was composed by Felix Mendelssohn in 1842 to accompany Shakespeare's famous A Midsummer's Night Dream theatrical production. Now, Mendelssohn's Wedding March was first played in a wedding in 1847, but it was again Princess Victoria who made the song a wedding trend and then a tradition when she used it at her wedding. Princess Victoria also wore a white wedding dress and veil like her mother had done, which further established this tradition as, of course, just like their mother, they were also incredibly popular and seen as these icons of fashion and tradition. So the bridal bouquet. Back in ancient Greece and Rome, it was all about herbs. There would be bouquets of herbs such as garlic, dill, and then just other herbs and spices that were thought to ward off evil spirits. So carrying a favorite flower variety is really a tradition that became popular in the 1840s when Queen Victoria married Prince Albert and carried a bouquet of snowdrops, which were his favorite flower. Queen Victoria also started the tradition of carrying myrtle in the royal bride's bouquet at her wedding. Using a cutting from her own bouquet, she planted a garden of myrtle bushes on the east facade of Fulham Palace. So, bridesmaids. Back in Roman times, matching outfits meant good luck and were a common wedding tradition. Back then, people believed that evil spirits would attend the wedding and attempt to curse the bride and groom. To confuse the spirits, though, there were bridesmaids who acted as decoys and dressed identically to the bride. The idea was that the spirits would be unsure which one was really the bride, and then they would leave, the happy couple alone to get married in peace. Now, this meant that bridesmaids would wear white. So just like Queen Victoria's bridesmaids, whatever color the bride was wearing, the bridesmaids were also expected to wear. So bridesmaids would wear white, just like Queen Victoria's bridesmaids. Some still do to this day. Do you remember Pippa Middleton, Kate Middleton's sister? Well, she wore white to her sister's wedding as the maid of honor. So this tradition seems to have gotten lost across the Atlantic, though, as it is very not common in America today. The bridesmaids all dress identically in the same color, or perhaps the same color scheme. That's becoming more trendy, but you don't normally see bridesmaids all wearing white. So wedding cake. The tradition of the wedding cake also dates back to ancient Rome, and that would be where guests broke a loaf of bread over the bride's head to symbolize fertility. The newlyweds would then share a few bites, while the guests would scoop up the leftover crumbs because those were considered good luck. In medieval England, the bride and groom had to try to kiss over a pile of stacked spice buns, scones, and cookies, a precursor to the tiered wedding cakes of today, and supposedly ensuring a prosperous future if they were able to successfully smooch without toppling, this giant pile of baked goods over. Now, over time, it developed into the kind of cakes that we know today. Like Queen Victoria had a wedding cake that weighed 300 pounds and was 3 tiers tall. So, of course, that translates very much into the kind of cakes and the shape of cakes that we have today. Now, this is not something that Victoria herself did that we can see, but this is another thing that became very popular in the Victorian era. And that is something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and a sixpence in her shoe. The saying, it seems to have gained popularity in the late Victorian era. The rhyme itself could be much older, though. It seems that it was first published in the late 1800s, but it could have been written. Some people, it seems fuzzy, as with a lot of old things tend to be, that it could have first been written in Old English in 1100, but that seems to still be debatable. But what is not debatable is that most of the ingredients in this rhyme are meant to ward off the evil eye, which is a curse passed through a malicious glare that could make the bride infertile. The earliest recorded version of the first 2 lines that we have today started out in 1871, and it was in the short story Marriage Superstitions and the Miseries of a Bride-elect in St. James Magazine, when a female narrator states, "On the wedding day, I must wear something new, something borrowed, something blue." Now, the first recorded version of the rhyme as we know it today, which is the so-called Lancashire version, because that is where it is believed that this rhyme originated, was in an 1876 newspaper which reported a wedding where the bride wore, according to ancient custom, something old, something new, something borrowed, and blue. Now, in 1898, there was a compilation of English folklore which recounted that in this country, Lancashire, An old couplet dictates what the bride shall wear. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. A sixpence in her shoe seems to have been added later. Brides also carry or wear something old on their wedding day to symbolize the continuality or continuity with the past. Something new offers optimism for the future. Incorporating something borrowed brings the couple good luck, usually from a person who is happily married, and something blue as a bridal in the bridal ensemble symbolizes purity, fidelity, and love, and also could kind of harken back to the days where blue was the most popular color to get married in. The symbolism of the color blue also dates back to early Christianity, when the color was very much associated with the Virgin Mary, who is often depicted wearing a blue robe. Now, the sixpence in her shoe. This British coin is meant to represent prosperity for the couple as they start their new lives together, though the sixpence was discontinued or decommissioned in the UK in 1980. So, I believe that they started production of the sixpence in the 1500s, so it seems to have been added at some point between there. I do believe that this rhyme is older than just the late Victorian era, but that's really when it gained more popularity and more recognition outside of that one area where it had been known before then. So that is where that custom comes from, and it has been used in various wedding stories and actual weddings since then, to where it has really become a tradition to this day. Now, carrying on traditions. Nowadays, English royal weddings are international affairs that have the world turning in to watch. And this really started with Queen Victoria as well. Queen Victoria had the first big spectacle of a royal wedding. The royal wedding that was, well, the last kind of big affair before hers was Princess Charlotte's. But Princess Charlotte did not ride through the streets in a chariot, waving to the people. It was a very small family affair. Weddings were thought to be very private events that were pretty much only attended by extremely close friends and family. But with Queen Victoria, she was an incredibly popular queen. She was a nice young queen, and to kind of enhance her popularity as well, it wasn't necessarily her idea because she didn't like the idea of parading through the streets in her wedding dress all that much, but it was decided that it would be a great morale booster and public relations initiative for her wedding to really be not just a wedding for her, but the wedding for the nation to enjoy. So we really also have Queen Victoria to thank for, well, the spectacle that is a royal wedding. So the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer was seen on global television by an audience of 750 million people in 74 different countries all around the world. The weddings of her son, Prince William, and Prince Henry were also televised to millions of viewers around the world as well. These popular events, which follow the traditions of their ancestor, Queen Victoria, have also helped keep the traditions that she set alive, popular, and in the public eye, as all of the brides, they all wear white dresses. They have these, of course, Meghan Markle is one of my favorite veils of all time. So they wear the white dress. They have the veil. A lot of them still incorporate flowers that Queen Victoria herself used in her bouquet. They have these giant wedding cakes, just like Queen Victoria. Now they do switch up the music. They have not, I think that it's been a very long time, or at least the last several royal weddings, they have not used the Here Comes the Bride or the Wedding Recessional as their music. They have chosen different music to walk down the aisle and to recess down the aisle too. But that wasn't exactly a Queen Victoria tradition, that was a Princess Victoria tradition. So Britain also has a different idea of bridal parties than we do today, but a lot of the bridal party is made up of children, if they're not necessarily grown ladies. But Queen Victoria, of course, did have, basically, her bridesmaids were her ladies in waiting, the ladies of the court that she had chosen for various personal relationship and also political reasons. So that's kind of the idea that we have in America of bridesmaids, is your friends that you have chosen for various reasons that you would like to stay up there and support you in your wedding day. But of course, they don't usually wear white, as Queen Victoria's did. And such as the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they had children that actually follow behind the bridal party. So the bride is not the last one to enter the church. The bride is actually then followed by her bridesmaids or her bridal party, which could be made up of adults and or children. All right, do we have any questions?
All right, hello everyone, it's Libba from behind the scenes, and also wanted to give a shout out to our intern Andrews, who is working behind the scenes as well. Great job with your first live stream, Andrews. So do get your questions in the chat if you have any for Marie. That was fascinating though, I must say. Something that comes to my mind though is Victoria must have had some kind of personality. I mean, that's a lot of extravagance, and of course she's a queen, but could you just give us an idea of who is Queen Victoria when it comes to her personality, so that we can kind of connect the dots with, we hear all these, her favorite flowers, she seems to have very romantic ideas about the fashion she wears and the design. So what was she like?
There's a lot of different accounts. She became queen at a very young age, and always kind of knew that she was going to be queen, but she had a very, I would say, difficult childhood, a very restrained childhood, where she was an only child who was sheltered and kept away from the court. She had a difficult relationship with her mother. She hated her mother's advisor and blamed him, Lord John, for basically this idea that they had of the strict idea of raising her, which was the Kensington system. So she had a very lonely childhood, one where she was very isolated. She had to sleep in the same room as her mother. Her governess, Lazen, was really kind of one of her few close confidants that was outside of, well, her mother and then, of course, Lord John. So I think there we see, and also her father had died when she was very young. So those are, of course, very formative years for Victoria, and she only gets out from under her mother and Lord John's thumb when she does become queen. And of course, Lord John tries to basically slander Victoria's reputation, saying that she's unfit, she's too young, she's mentally unstable like her grandfather, and needs a regent. But Queen Victoria was incredibly stubborn and refused, and banished Lord John, almost tried to distance herself from her mother at some points, tried to reconnect with her mother at some points. Like I said, it was a difficult relationship there. But you see that Victoria is a very stubborn person. She has very set ideas about what she wants to do and how she wants her reign to be. She didn't necessarily like the reign of her predecessor and thought that he was too extravagant, and she wanted to bring dignity back to the monarchy, and as well as then meeting her, well, cousin, Prince Albert. The two very much had a very fond regard for each other. Victoria was head over heels in love. As she writes in her diary, we do believe that Prince Albert also felt a strong affection for her very much. At the beginning, he would write and said that he did indeed like Victoria. It wasn't just a marriage of political convenience, even though it did help politically as well. But Victoria was head over heels in love with Prince Albert, and she also had a very strong relationship with her first prime minister, Lord Melbourne, and that really became almost like a father figure to her because she's very young. She still wants guidance, but she doesn't want it from her mother or Lord John. She wants someone that she feels like she can have more trust and confidence in. And then she goes on to have a very traditionalist almost idea of how a monarch should behave. You kind of get that idea of Victorian propriety, of that stiff British upper lip, of not being incredibly flamboyant, but still being regal, of showing off the wealth and power of the British Empire, because this is also a time period where the sun does not set on the British Empire. Victoria has pretty much, at this point, it has become a traditional monarchy. Not necessarily a traditional monarchy, but because she's not an absolute monarch by any means. The monarchy has really become a ceremonial idea at this point. They have almost zero political power. So since they have zero political power, they exercise their social power a lot. And especially Prince Albert has a lot of social ideas and social programs that make life better for everyone in Britain, or at least they try to. They look into industry and science. Seems like Prince Albert was a little bit more into that than Queen Victoria was. These ideas of social changes and social programs that they had. But she was incredibly, if I had to sum her up very concisely, she was very stubborn. She knew what she wanted. She knew that she was the monarch, and she also took the idea of being like the social head of state very seriously, to where she knew if she did something, everyone else wanted to do it as well, and also knew that she had very limited political power. Or if she didn't, she might have liked to think she had political power, but she actually didn't. I don't know. That's a tough one, because it's really, in her reign, we see the transition, but she handles the transition really well, to the point where we still have a British monarchy where a lot of other European countries don't. So she had to be skilled enough in that way to kind of smooth it over, to maintain all of the power and wealth that they can, while also giving more power to the prime minister and to parliament. But I think this was one of the things that I just, when I think of Queen Victoria and like her stubbornness, and also how things should be done her way, is she didn't like the sound of knocking. She thought people should scratch at her door, because she thought knocking was too harsh, so you had to scratch at Queen Victoria's door.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
I mean, all of that was fascinating. That's particularly fascinating. Now, Susan is interested in learning more about Prince Albert. Can you describe his personality? Where was he from? And also, how did he die?
So he is from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which is a part of Germany, which is not Germany yet, because the wars for German unification happen after he is already in England. So Germany is still it's kind of the Holy Roman Empire still, where it's a lot of different principalities, and it's not one unified Germany. But that being said, it's when you think of like Germany, traditional customs and such, that's going to be his more traditional upbringing. Prince Albert is an interesting character that a lot of people have looked more into. Now there's more theories about different things about what exactly did Prince Albert do, because a lot of his legacy is highly romanticized by Queen Victoria, who was absolutely distraught upon his death. She also romanticized their relationship. They had what I would say, it was a romantic relationship, but it wasn't perfect. It was a marriage. They were people. They had their flaws. Prince Albert seemed to have a little bit of a struggle with the idea of not being king. It was in a very traditional idea of society of like the man should be head of his household. He wasn't, because he wasn't king. He was her prince consort. So there was ideas of, well, does Victoria have to obey her husband even though she's queen? And there was a lot of dynamics about that which caused strain in their marital relations. Whenever Victoria would give birth and, you know, have to take some time off from being queen and all of her duties, then he would take over, and he really liked doing that because he thought he might be better at it. And then, of course, she felt like he was taking power away from her, but also he was really good at it. So anyway, complicated there. So they had some power struggles, it seems like. But he seems to be very serious from what I can tell, personality-wise, from just writings and observations of people. He also very much liked the moral institution and supported Victoria and them for being very non-flamboyant people, of being very rather stoic and simple. I mean, simple in a way that wasn't extravagant, because they're still the monarchs and they still feel like they need to display wealth and power, but they feel like they need to do it in a non-garish way. And Albert was very much in line with that. He also thought very much the moral side of things as well. His father seemed to have mistresses and things like that, and he was not about that. And that was a thing for it sounds terrible, but usually monarchs have people that they are in love with that are not just their romantic, like, king or queen that they are said that they would love, and they had extramarital affairs. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert seem to not have had any of those throughout their entire relationship, which is incredibly odd for a royal couple. But that was another way that they thought that they were setting a good example for their people and also for themselves, because they had seen other people do it and they didn't like it. So that's part of like the morality, the Victorian morality that they had, that kind of created this idea of the Victorian domestic sphere and the outer sphere and the Victorian family, because they had 9 children too, which Queen Victoria did not like giving birth. She did not like being pregnant, but she was a lot of the time. Prince Albert was also incredibly interested in science and technology and these advancements of the first industrial revolution and going into the second industrial revolution. He was very interested, and I believe he was friends with Ada Lovelace, who was one of the first female mathematicians and kind of created a pre-runner to a computer, and was also very interested in British industry. He created and really headed up the Great Exhibition in the 1850s, which really was his crowning glory of public things that he had done, which was incredibly popular, showed off British industry to the world, and the public also thought it was just like the best thing. So that was a lot of what he did. The Victorian Albert, they also they didn't necessarily start, but lent their name to / started the Victorian Albert Museum. So they also started like institutions of learning such as that, and different public like social things. Like they enjoyed music and the patron of the arts and the Royal Ballet, things like that. They were big supporters of. And then sadly he died rather young. I believe he was in his 40s of typhoid.
All right, thank you. And let's see, Susan says, in one of the Jane Austen movies, guests yell, "Throw the coins," after the wedding, and the groom throws some. Was this common at weddings or just among the wealthy? When was this tradition popular?
All right, so it does not seem that that is a Victorian wedding tradition or one that has proceeded in popularity. I do think I know what movie you are talking about. I honestly, in any of my research, did not come across anything that specifically mentioned that, but I also wasn't looking at Regency era wedding traditions. if I had to guess, if it is true, it would be a wealthy thing that, you know, display of wealth. I can throw money at people, and then the people that have attended your wedding can get a coin. But I honestly do not know about that.
Now, I'm curious about Queen Victoria's guest list. I mean, would it be a rather large guest list? I mean, who would be allowed to attend the Queen's wedding?
Yes, so this is actually an interesting thing because, like I said, with Princess Charlotte, it was an incredibly small affair. It was their families, a few friends. It wasn't a big deal. With Queen Victoria, when you have a 300-pound wedding cake, and that's not your only wedding cake, you have more as well. This is really like the first really big royal wedding. I did not memorize her guest list. I'll be honest, but she invited a lot of people, important people, heads of state. Of course, anyone who was anyone in British society was there. And that really kind of started this idea of who can come to a British royal wedding. It's interesting because I assume with Victoria, it's really just heads of state, people who are important in politics, people who are important because they were born with certain titles from certain families. Those are the people who are going to be invited. It wasn't really until Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer's wedding that you start to have celebrities, people like actors and singers and activists and people who are not necessarily political but are in the political sphere invited to weddings. I believe like one of the people was Lord Elton John was invited to Lady Diana's wedding. In fact, the Queen Mother was kind of like, we're going to have celebrities there with us? Like, that's a thing that we're doing? So Lady Diana, well, she broke a lot of royal traditions in her day. That was kind of the start of that for her. And then her two children have also invited celebrities and people who have more social currency to their weddings. I believe Meghan Markle invited Oprah to her wedding, and because they, of course, were friends, but also well, Meghan was an actress herself. So you have far more people in the arts, actresses, TV personalities attending Meghan and Harry's wedding as well. So it's interesting to see how the definition of who's invited to a royal wedding is very much an evolving thing.
Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have. We do have Sue, who is going to tell people to scratch at her door from now on. So
you can be like Queen Victoria.
Yes, exactly. So that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Marie, for putting this together.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all of our members who joined us today. And do keep a lookout. We're going to have our March schedule out pretty soon with all of our members' live streams and our Wednesday live streams.
Oh, one last fun fact. Queen Victoria's wedding dress is on display, but the lace part of it has been removed, and her veil is also not on display because she was actually buried in it.
And we'll end with that. Thanks, Marie, and thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.